Right, so welcome to our maths workshop. Thank you so much for coming and listening and watching. Let's get going. So, I think a lot of people, when they look at the EYFS and they say, you're only looking at numbers to 10. You know, my daughter can already count to 10, my daughter can count to 20, can count to 100. Counting's a rhyme, counting's like a song, it's like learning your ABC. So basically what reception, what are the EYFS is about, is actually learning what a number is. Personally, I think we have the most fun. We have the most fun. We have a really important job to actually teach the children what a number is. Okay, it's more than just a word, it's a quantity. So basically how we start off is looking at quantity. So we look at cardinality. So cardinality is when you can look at a group of objects and you can count how many there are. So if we're looking at these apples here, I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 apples. I know the last number is how many there are, so that is the quantity, okay? And then we're linking that quantity to the name of the number, okay? So we have 1, I'll say it again, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So our base at the beginning, we're looking at quantity and making sure we're counting one object once because it represents one number. So we know that is a 1 and a 1 and we're adding as we go up. Mm-hmm. And you want to add to that?
We were saying, weren't we, about this?
You go.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
So we sort of try and really challenge it as well and extend by, although they might know they've counted that and there's 5 in a group, the fact that there's a different colour one actually is really irrelevant. It's something to talk about, but there are still 5 in that set. So that's one way that we sort of extend them and challenge them.
At the beginning of reception.
So throughout our teaching for the year, we follow the sort of sequence of representing numbers, comparing numbers and composing numbers. So we always start with representing and we really want the children to be strong at subitizing. So subitizing is being able to automatically recognise a quantity. So for example, if I did this to you, you just know, don't you, how many fingers I'm holding up. You're not sat there counting them. You're at a stage where you're subitizing, you can automatically do it. We do this through a range of resources. So often at nursery starts with finger numbers, counting rhymes. When they come to school, we'll sort of introduce dice numbers and we want them to get to a point where they're not there counting all of the dots on the dice. We use 5 frames and eventually they might turn into a 10 frame. And if we've got 10 counters in the 10 frame, they don't need to count that, they just know it's full. If there's 1 missing, they know that 1 less than 10 is 9, they don't need to count it. And yeah, there's very little focus actually on the numeral when we first start looking at number. It is all about the quantity, as Ms Fox said.
Okay, so when we compare numbers, it's looking at different numbers. Okay, so we use the number line a lot and we're looking at mathematical language like more, less and equal. So when we look at a number line, we'll be able to ask them questions like what is 1 less than 5? So they know when we say the word less, we jump down the number line. When we say the number more, we jump up the number line. So it's getting them to understand that the quantity of them is here, but actually moving up and down what is more and less as a quantity. So we use the number line a lot. And we also look at visually comparing, being able to look at 2 different groups of objects and being able to know which one has more, which one has less, just by looking at them without counting. And actually that's a really hard concept for the girls to get their heads around, but the more we do it, the more we introduce it, the easier it gets for them. And this will help us to lay foundations for number sentences, because they'll be able to look at 2 different quantities and be able to know together they'll be able to create something more. And we always try and encourage them to put the bigger number first. So looking at here, you can tell that there's more over this side than that side, so we would try and encourage them to put the bigger number first when we're adding or subtracting.
So after representing and comparing quantities, we will move on to composing numbers, and actually we do this really slowly across the year. So for example, at the moment we've just got to number 4, and with number 2, number 3, we've done all of these 3 steps and we'll continue to do that to 10. So with composing numbers, that's all about the way a number is made up and getting the children to understand that there's quantities within a bigger quantity. So for example, on this 5 frame, understanding that a 5 is made up of a 3 and a 2, but not just that, it could be made up of a 5 and a 0 or a 4 and a 1. So getting them to understand that numbers are made up of smaller numbers. And one of the sequences that we follow when doing this is a concrete pictorial and abstract sequence, which basically means at the very beginning, and you'll have seen some of this on Seesaw when we did the part whole model with the rocket. We're at the very beginning, we're using concrete objects, so the children are physically moving and putting those numbers together. We use the part whole model where the top circle is the whole number, and then we partition and split those whole numbers into smaller numbers. We use things like 5 frames, Numicon. Numicon are really good because you can put them on top of each other and understand again that that number 3 is made up of a 2 and a 1. Dominoes are another great way. And then eventually we might move on to pictorial. So today we've already started doing a little bit of pictorial. We had one question linked to doctors, and it said the doctor's got 2 small plasters and 1 big plaster in his bag, and there was a picture, so that they're making the link that that 2 and the 1 together is a 3, and that really leads on to problem solving, and eventually the children hopefully will have really strong reasoning because of all the rich conversations that we do have through composing numbers. And eventually moving on to abstracts, and maybe by the end of the year. But again, in reception there really isn't much focus on the numeral or forming numbers. It is just something that we do to set them up nicely for year 1, but they might get to a point where they really want to start experimenting with numbers and symbols, and we encourage them to maybe start writing number sentences.
And that's kind of where we extend them, because we do have some children that are really needing that concrete support now, using gems and being able to hold them, where some children are already ready to move on to pictorial, and then some will move on to abstract. But it's really just looking at what your daughter needs at that time to be able to understand number, because it's all about quantity, like we keep saying. Okay, the language of math. So like it says here, there are 600 mathematical words that we use in reception, on top of all the other subjects that we teach in reception. But we can use this throughout every single lesson. You know, if there's 4 children allowed in the role play area, so we could go over there and say, right, how many of us are here? And if there's too many, okay, well, there's 5 of you, how many need to leave? And it's just actually putting it into real life situations and getting maths into real life situations. But yeah, lots of conversation about more, less, estimating, and they're things that you can do at home as well. You know, when you're laying the table, you know, if you put 4 forks out, well, how many knives do we need? And actually maths is everywhere. You can put maths in lots of different conversations. So we have a really, we use a lot of mathematical vocabulary, not just in our maths lessons, but throughout the day, everywhere, don't we?
One of the things we were going to mention is you might have heard the girls say they come in the morning and they have to sign in, and we've got 10 frames on the door, so they're putting their face in each square, and eventually they'll be able to notice if one 10 frame is full, when we do move on to looking at team numbers, that is 10 plus a single digit number, a unit, rather than just counting every single number. But we often have conversations about, right, one person's away today, so how many are here? It's just every day.
Yeah, and we count all the children when they come in at the end of the day. So when we've taken the register, we're like, oh, it looks like there's 17, let's check, and we count together, because then it looks, I've got one child that equals one quantity, 2, and then they can really see that it's a quantity.
And it's not just isolated to a maths lesson, it really is everywhere.
Yeah.
So one thing that we have introduced is something called 5-minute maths. So although we have rich conversations about number and maths every single day through all of the teaching that we do allocate time each day to something called 5-minute maths. And in these sessions, we really focus on retrieval and building the children's fluency, so that we're not just teaching an area of maths and then leaving it. We're revisiting it, what we did last week. Last week we spoke about measures, so in today's starters, they were about measures and comparing and using that sort of language. And it's just really getting the children to recall their previous learning. And we've got some really good resources that we use for this, one of them being called Number Sense, and they are short videos, and there's loads of different kinds of videos. Some of them have got 5 frames. This particular one has lots of different objects, and it's just getting the children to have those rich conversations about what they can see. So here, if they're able to subitize, they might notice that actually what we've been talking about is 3 is often made up in a triangle shape, a 4 is often made up in a square shape. So without even needing to count, they can tell that's 3 socks. But also you can take the conversation one step further. Okay, there's 3 socks, but they are in a pair. So how many individual socks are there all together? We also use number blocks, which links really nicely with 5-minute with Number Sense. And we do each week, we're looking at number formation, but again, that isn't something that's required at this stage in the year. It's just us helping set them up for year 1.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of our early learning goal, what are we working towards in reception? So basically, we want to have a deep understanding of number 10, exactly like what we've been talking about, to be able to compare, compose and represent. Thank you very much. We also want them to subitize up to 5, and we want them to automatically recall number bonds to 5 and potentially to 10. So that's being able to compose numbers to 10.
So as well as so the early learning goal for maths is split into 2 parts, number and numerical patterns, and really we like to try and teach the number first. We still do shape, space and measure, like I said last week we did measures, but the idea is if they've got that strong foundation of number, they can then start taking it one step further and really getting into the depth of what number is, what the patterns are. So if our children can confidently count to 10 to 20, they should be able to apply that to the counting system beyond 20 and recognise that the pattern within that. We look at odds and evens, we look at doubles, so 7 and 7 is 14, 5 and 5 is 10, then we look at halving and sharing, counting in 2s and lots of patterning. But one thing that's great about numerical patterns is they all kind of link. So for example, when we're counting in 2s, we will start by teaching them odds and evens, because actually if you take away the odds, you're counting the evens, which are counting in 2s. You just skip the odds. But also understanding that the even numbers are the ones that can be shared equally, so it also fits into sharing and halving. An odd number, there's always one left over. Anything you want to add to that?
That's great, no.
So these are some of the really nice resources, again, making it really concrete, so the children are physically doing it, physically moving here, they're physically sharing.
And actually we do that every day, so our maths days are on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and you'll notice around the classroom tomorrow they're putting the right amount of stickers on the teddy bear that links to our hospital theme this week. So it all really links to our learning, what we're doing, and just make it as exciting as we can, put them in different situations to be able to apply their mathematical knowledge. That's the early learning goal.
I pretty much just spoke about that, but for numerical patterns, the early learning goal is that we want them to be able to count verbally to 20 and begin doing that beyond. Comparing quantities up to 10 in a range of different ways, which sort of links with the more than, less than, what's one more, what's one less, and then eventually exploring all of those things I just mentioned, like double facts, odds, evens, and sharing and halving.
So how can you guys help at home? So like we said, maths is everywhere, number is everywhere. When you come in today, how many chairs are on the front line? There's so many different ways that you can talk about number. But using games as well. I played Kaplunk with one of my friend's children, and actually when I was playing it, I was thinking, wow, there's so much mathematical language here as I take it out of school. But how many marbles do you have? Okay, but I've got this many marbles. Who's got more? Who's got less? Or what if I give you one? And just this, you can just use mathematical language in lots of different games at home. Measuring together, I don't know if you're cooking, what weighs more, what's heavier, what's lighter, and measuring length of objects. You could measure each other, you could measure them on doors, you could have a look and think, oh, what's taller than that bus? When you're walking down the street, what would be smaller than the bus? There's lots of different language you could use there. We also have lots of different useful websites that you can use at home, that we will share this with you as well. We use the White Rose Maths app on our iPads. It's a really good way to subitise quickly, and there's lots of different, as you progress through, different ways to look at number as well.
And we've got a handout, as we did for the literacy workshop. We've put it just over there when you go and have a look at the resources.
Yeah.
And we have got the iPads out actually, so we can show you some of these apps if you do want to jot them down. But they are on the handout too.
Yeah. But yes. Any questions? Sorry, there's a lot of information there, wasn't there? But I think what would be really good if we could just actually go and explore what we're talking about, and actually
feel free to ask us.
Because I think we're all children deep down, and actually being able to look at something and touch something and using that concrete kind of approach that we used at the beginning is a great way to learn, and that's why EYFS is the best. But I think it's just really key to get our point across is, if we can secure their number to 10, actually they can do anything with any number. If they can understand that, 2 quantities could make a bigger quantity if we're adding them together, they can do that with any number. So it's really key that we really cement that foundation of number and quantity, so they can do whatever they want with it moving forward.
And what we said about the part whole model
Yeah.
on this slide, they still use it in year 1. I'm not sure about year 2, but they are still partitioning
Yeah.
numbers, and they'll start partitioning numbers that are in the tens
Yeah.
units, looking at what bigger numbers can be broken down into.
And we're just giving them different ways to solve problems. You know, using a TenFriend, using Numicon, it's just giving them different ways to work things out. And it's up to us to teach them how to use it effectively. And actually, that's why we have so many resources, because there are so many different ways to teach it. And every child's different. Some children will learn, you know, with using a 5 frame, but some children might find that a bit confusing. Some people might like the part whole model or the Numicon because it's more fun. So every child learns differently, and that's why we have so many different resources that we're able to kind of find out which one makes that light bulb moment and go, I've got it, you know. So shall we head over and have a look at the resources?